The most dangerous secrets are not the ones people hide from you. They are the ones they convince you never to question. The night before everything changed began like dozens of other family gatherings at Harrison Estate. The massive old money dining room glowed beneath crystal chandeliers, while soft music drifted through the house. Staff moved quietly between guests. Expensive wine was poured. Conversations remained polite. To anyone visiting for the first time, it would have looked like the picture of success. Isabel Harrison sat beside David near the center of the long oak table. At 48, she carried herself with the confidence that came from years of belonging to one of the most respected families in the county. Her long blonde hair was perfectly styled, her posture effortless, her smile measured. She knew how to make people feel comfortable. More importantly, she knew how to make them underestimate what she noticed. Across the room, Harrison Reed sat at the far end of the table. As usual, he seemed detached from the evening's conversations. Ethan stood near the staircase watching relatives move from one discussion to another. Eleanor remained beneath the chandelier, quietly stirring tea she barely touched. Something about the atmosphere felt different. Isabel noticed it the moment she entered the room. It was not anything obvious. Nobody was arguing. Nobody appeared upset. Yet a strange tension lingered beneath every smile. Several times throughout dinner, she caught Eleanor looking toward the library hallway before quickly looking away. Thomas Whitmore arrived later than expected and carried a thin leather folder he never allowed out of his sight. Even James, who normally moved through the house with calm professionalism, appeared distracted. Isabel tried to ignore the feeling. The annual trust meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. Naturally, people were anxious. Large decisions were always discussed during those meetings. Future responsibilities, property management, family investments. Nothing unusual. Yet as the evening continued, small details began to stand out. Harrison exchanged a brief glance with Thomas. Ethan seemed unusually focused on conversations he normally would not care about. David looked exhausted, as though something weighed heavily on his mind. Then, just before dessert was served, Eleanor accidentally dropped a folded note beside her chair. Isabel bent to retrieve it. Eleanor immediately reached for it, almost too quickly. For a brief second, Isabel saw 3 handwritten words before the paper disappeared back into Eleanor's hand. Lily Carter file. Eleanor's expression changed instantly. Fear. Real fear. Isabel smiled politely and said nothing. But long after dinner ended, those 3 words refused to leave her thoughts. Because she had never heard the name Lily Carter before. And somehow, she knew that was exactly why she needed to find out who she was. The next morning, Isabel woke earlier than usual. The name she had seen on Eleanor's note lingered in her thoughts with surprising persistence. By 7 o'clock, sunlight was already filtering through the tall windows of Harrison Estate, casting long shadows across polished floors and antique furniture. Normally, she enjoyed the quiet hours before the house became busy. Today, however, her attention remained fixed on a single question. Who was Lily Carter? At breakfast, the estate seemed unchanged. David reviewed messages on his phone while barely touching his coffee. Ethan arrived carrying a notebook and disappeared almost immediately after exchanging a few polite words. Harrison sat near the window looking out across the grounds as if he had nowhere important to be. Yet Isabel noticed something unusual. Every time Lily's name crossed her mind, she found herself looking toward Harrison. She could not explain why. It was simply a feeling. After breakfast, she visited the library. The room stretched upward with shelves that held generations of family records, letters, journals, and legal documents. Eleanor was already there, seated beside a small table near the fireplace. A book rested open in her lap, although she did not appear to be reading. Isabel sat across from her and smiled. "You seemed distracted last night." Eleanor returned a polite smile. "Trust meetings make everyone nervous." "Perhaps," Isabel replied. "Or perhaps something else does." For a moment, neither woman spoke. Isabel considered mentioning the note directly. Instead, she changed the subject. The reaction she received was enough. Every time family history entered the conversation, Eleanor became noticeably cautious. By afternoon, Isabel's curiosity had only grown stronger. She began reviewing old estate files in a records room rarely visited by anyone except staff and attorneys. Most folders contained predictable information: property taxes, renovation records, investment reports. Then she found something strange. Several documents from nearly 20 years earlier referenced attachments that were no longer present. Entire sections appeared to have been removed. Someone had gone through considerable effort to ensure those pages could not be easily found. As evening approached, Thomas Whitmore arrived carrying the same leather folder from the previous night. Isabel watched him cross the hallway toward a private office. Before entering, he exchanged a brief glance with Harrison. It lasted only a second. Yet both men seemed to understand something nobody else did. Isabel remained hidden around the corner until they disappeared from view. Then she looked toward the closed office door. Whatever was inside that folder, she was beginning to suspect it had something to do with a woman whose name nobody wanted to discuss. The trust meeting was less than 24 hours away when Isabel finally found something that did not belong. Late that evening, most of the estate had grown quiet. The staff had finished their work, guests had retired to their rooms, and only a few lights remained visible throughout the enormous house. Isabel returned to the records room she had searched earlier. She told herself she was simply satisfying curiosity. Deep down, she knew it had become something more than that. The missing attachments continued to bother her. Someone had removed pages from family files, and people did not erase history without a reason. She carefully reviewed several boxes that had not been opened in years. Most contained routine correspondence and legal paperwork. Then she discovered a narrow folder tucked behind a row of financial reports. It carried no official label, no estate seal, no classification number. That alone made it unusual. Inside were only 3 documents. The first was a copy of an old property transfer. The second was a handwritten note referencing a private trust amendment. The third stopped her cold. It was a photograph. The image appeared to be more than 20 years old. Standing beside a younger Eleanor was a woman Isabel had never seen before. On the back of the photograph, written in fading blue ink, were 2 names: Eleanor Harrison, Lily Carter. Isabel stared at the words for several seconds. Before she could examine the photograph further, footsteps echoed somewhere in the hallway. She quickly returned everything to the folder and listened. The sound faded. Still, her pulse remained elevated. The discovery raised more questions than answers. Why would Eleanor keep a photograph hidden? Why was Lily standing beside her? And why had nobody ever mentioned her existence? The next morning, preparations for the trust meeting accelerated. Advisors arrived. Staff arranged conference materials. Thomas moved through the estate carrying files from room to room. Harrison seemed unusually calm. Ethan watched everything with growing interest. Isabel tried to focus on routine matters, but her attention kept returning to the photograph. During lunch, she casually mentioned old family archives while speaking with Eleanor. The reaction was immediate. Eleanor lowered her fork and became noticeably uncomfortable. It lasted only a moment before she recovered, but Isabel saw it clearly. There was history attached to that name. History powerful enough to unsettle someone who rarely showed emotion. As the afternoon light faded beyond the estate windows, Isabel returned to her room and studied the photograph once more. This time she noticed something she had missed earlier. In the background stood a young child. The face was partially obscured. The details were unclear. Yet one thought entered her mind and refused to leave. What if Lily Carter was never the real secret? What if the real secret was the child standing beside her? The possibility followed Isabel throughout the evening. She tried to focus on the preparations surrounding the trust meeting, but her thoughts kept returning to the photograph and the child standing beside Lily Carter. The image was old and unclear, yet something about it felt important. Harrison Estate had always been built on history. Families like this preserved every detail, every record, every story that reinforced their legacy. The idea that someone could simply disappear from that history seemed impossible, which meant it had probably been intentional. The following morning, the estate awakened earlier than usual. Lawyers, advisors, and consultants began arriving before breakfast. Vehicles moved steadily through the front gates while staff prepared conference rooms and organized documents. Isabel watched from a second-floor window and noticed Thomas Whitmore arriving with 2 large document cases instead of 1. It was a small detail, but lately she had learned that small details mattered. Downstairs, Ethan appeared equally distracted. During breakfast, she caught him studying Harrison more than once. Harrison, however, remained exactly the same. Calm, quiet, unreadable. If the upcoming meeting concerned hidden family history, he showed no sign of concern. That certainty unsettled Isabel more than any argument could have. Later that morning, she made a decision. Rather than searching estate records again, she visited Eleanor directly. She found her in a small sitting room overlooking the gardens. For several minutes, they spoke about ordinary subjects. The weather, family guests, the meeting. Then Isabel placed the photograph on the table between them. Eleanor froze. Not dramatically, not visibly enough for most people to notice. But Isabel noticed. "Who is she?" Isabel asked softly. Eleanor stared at the photograph without answering. "I think you already know more than you are telling everyone." A long silence followed. Finally, Eleanor lifted her eyes. Some truths survive because nobody asks the right questions. It was not an answer, yet it was more than Eleanor had given before. Then she looked directly at the child in the background of the photograph. For the first time, genuine sadness crossed her face. "The wrong decision was made many years ago," she whispered. Before Isabel could ask what that meant, the door opened. James entered carrying a message. The trust meeting would begin in less than an hour. Eleanor immediately stood and left the room. Isabel remained seated, staring at the photograph. One question now outweighed every other mystery. If a wrong decision had truly been made years ago, who had benefited from it? And who had lost everything because of it? The trust meeting began precisely at 11 o'clock. The conference room inside Harrison Estate was filled with familiar faces, legal advisors, financial consultants, and members of the family who had gathered for what was expected to be a routine review of estate matters. Isabel took her seat beside David and immediately sensed that something was different. The room felt unusually cautious. Conversations were shorter. Smiles seemed forced. Even Thomas Whitmore appeared more reserved than usual as he organized documents across the long polished table. Harrison sat at the far end of the room with the same calm expression he always carried. Ethan occupied a chair near the wall, quietly observing everyone. For nearly an hour, the meeting proceeded normally. Financial reports were reviewed. Investment summaries were discussed. Property updates were presented. Yet Isabel noticed that Thomas repeatedly returned to one particular folder without opening it. The behavior drew her attention every time. Finally, after the routine matters concluded, Thomas removed a sealed envelope from inside the folder. The room immediately became silent. Isabel felt her pulse quicken. Thomas looked toward Eleanor before speaking. Eleanor lowered her eyes. "Before we continue," Thomas said carefully, "there is a historical matter that requires acknowledgement." No one interrupted. He placed several documents on the table, but did not yet distribute them. Instead, he asked a simple question. "Does anyone here recognize the name Lily Carter?" The effect was immediate. Eleanor closed her eyes for a brief moment. Ethan leaned forward. David appeared confused. Harrison remained completely still. Isabel felt every instinct sharpen. At last, a name that had existed only in whispers had entered the room openly. Thomas continued. "The records connected to this name were removed from the primary family archives many years ago." Several advisors exchanged surprised looks. "Why?" David asked. Thomas adjusted his glasses, but did not answer directly. "Because someone believed the information would create complications regarding future inheritance matters." The words settled heavily over the room. Inheritance matters. Isabel immediately thought of the child in the photograph. The possibility she had been trying to ignore suddenly felt much more real. Then Thomas opened the envelope and removed. The room remained silent after Harrison's statement. Even the advisors who had spent decades working with wealthy families seemed unsure how to respond. Thomas Whitmore looked down at the document in his hands before carefully placing it on the table. Isabel could feel the atmosphere shifting around her. The mystery was no longer centered on Lily Carter herself. It had moved toward something larger. Someone larger. David broke the silence first. "What child?" he asked. His voice carried genuine confusion. Thomas exchanged a glance with Eleanor. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Eleanor slowly folded her hands together. The sadness Isabel had seen earlier returned. 22 years ago, Eleanor said quietly, a decision was made that affected more than one life. Nobody interrupted. At the time, people believed they were protecting the family. Ethan leaned forward. Protecting it from what? Eleanor hesitated. From scandal, from uncertainty, from questions they did not want asked. Isabel listened carefully. The explanation felt incomplete, but it confirmed one thing. The secret had never been about money alone. It was about identity. Thomas finally distributed copies of several historical records. Most were old correspondence and trust memoranda. One page immediately captured Isabel's attention. A trust amendment had been drafted years earlier, but never fully implemented. Attached to it was a notation referencing a beneficiary whose name had been redacted from the public version of the file. Ethan noticed it as well. "Someone removed the name," he said. Thomas nodded. "Years ago." David looked from one page to another. "Who ordered that?" No answer came immediately. Across the table, Harrison remained calm, almost patient. Isabel found herself studying him. For days she had wondered why he seemed unsurprised by every new revelation. Now she began to understand. He had known the story long before anyone else in the room. What she still did not understand was why he had waited. Then Sophia Bennett entered carrying a thin folder. Several people turned toward her. Thomas accepted the folder and opened it. Inside was a certified copy of a birth record connected to the same period as the missing trust amendment. The room grew even quieter. Isabel could see Ethan reading over Thomas's shoulder. His expression changed. No one spoke immediately after Thomas's statement. The weight of his words seemed to settle across the conference room like a storm cloud. Isabel looked around the table. David appeared confused. Eleanor stared at her hands. Ethan remained focused on the folder as though he already suspected where the story was heading. Harrison sat quietly at the far end of the room, showing no sign of surprise. That calm expression unsettled Isabel more than anything else. Thomas slowly reopened the folder and removed several additional documents. "For many years," he said, "these records were separated from the primary estate files. Only a small number of people knew they existed." He placed copies in front of David, Isabel, and Ethan. Isabel scanned the pages. The documents referenced guardianship discussions, trust recommendations, and correspondence between family advisors dating back more than 2 decades. Several names appeared repeatedly. Eleanor, Thomas, Lily Carter. One name did not appear. The name of the child. It was missing from every page. "Why remove the identity?" David asked. Thomas looked toward Eleanor before answering. "The future." Now she was realizing entire sections of that history had been hidden from her. Sophia stepped forward and placed another document beside Thomas. "This was recovered from archived legal correspondence," she explained. "It confirms that concerns about inheritance rights existed long before the current trust structure was created." Ethan carefully examined the page. "Someone was protecting the child," he said quietly. "Or protecting themselves from the child," Sophia replied. The distinction changed everything. Isabel looked toward Harrison. "Then why did it happen?" Eleanor closed her eyes briefly before answering. "Because powerful people convinced themselves they were protecting the future." Nobody responded. The explanation felt painfully human. The possibility remained in Isabel's mind as the meeting continued. She told herself not to jump to conclusions. Too many facts were still missing. Yet the date on the documents and Eleanor's reaction refused to leave her thoughts. Across the table, Ethan remained focused on every page placed before him. He seemed determined to understand the truth regardless of where it led. Thomas carefully organized the remaining records before opening one final folder. Unlike the others, this one appeared older. The edges were worn. Several pages carried handwritten annotations made years earlier. These documents were never intended to become part of the public family archive, Thomas said. However, circumstances have changed. David leaned forward. "Then tell us plainly what happened." Thomas nodded. 22 years ago, Lily Carter became connected to this family through circumstances that affected inheritance planning. Isabel noticed that he chose every word carefully. "Was she a relative?" David asked. Thomas hesitated. Before he could answer, Harrison spoke. "She was part of the story, not the whole story." The room fell silent once again. Sophia opened another file and removed a certified record. This time she placed it directly in front of David. As he read, confusion slowly gave way to disbelief. Isabel could not see the document clearly, but she noticed Eleanor quietly wiping away a tear. Whatever was written on the page was something she had carried for many years. Ethan looked toward David. "What is it?" David did not answer immediately. Finally, he lowered the document onto the table. The records show that a recommendation was made to include an additional beneficiary within the family trust. Several advisors exchanged surprised glances. An additional beneficiary. The phrase seemed simple, yet its implications were enormous. Was the recommendation approved? Ethan asked. Thomas shook his head. No, why not? Thomas looked toward Eleanor again. This time she answered herself. Because people were afraid. The honesty of the statement struck everyone in the room. No complicated explanation. No legal language. Just fear. Fear of uncertainty. Fear of change. Fear of what the truth might mean. Isabel looked around the table. For the first time, she realized that nobody sitting there had created the secret alone. It had survived because multiple people had chosen silence. Then Harrison slowly stood from his chair. Every conversation stopped. He walked toward the center of the room and placed a single photograph on the table. The same photograph Isabel had found. Lily Carter. Eleanor. The child in the background. Harrison looked directly at Ethan. There is one final piece of the story, he said quietly. And it is time everyone stopped pretending they do not know who that child was. For several seconds, nobody moved. Ethan stared at the photograph lying on the conference table while every eye in the room turned toward him. The image that had seemed like a forgotten piece of family history suddenly carried an entirely different meaning. Harrison remained standing beside the table. His expression was calm, but there was relief in it as well. The kind of relief that comes when a burden carried for years can finally be set down. Thomas slowly opened the final document in the file. The child in this photograph, he said carefully, was the individual referenced in the trust recommendation that was never completed. David looked from the document to Ethan and back again. You are saying this was known all those years ago? Thomas nodded. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. Not by everyone, she said, but by enough people that the truth should never have disappeared. Isabel felt the pieces finally connecting. The missing records, the hidden files, the removed beneficiary, the fear Eleanor had described. None of it had been created by a single decision. It had been built through years of silence. Ethan looked down at the table. Why tell me now? He asked quietly. Harrison answered before anyone else could speak. Because the purpose was never to hide the truth forever. The purpose was to wait until people were willing to face it. The room remained silent. No one argued. No one challenged the documents. The evidence spoke for itself. Sophia organized the final records while Thomas explained that the trust would be reviewed and updated according to the information that had been preserved. David leaned back in his chair, absorbing everything he had learned. For years he had believed the family story was complete. Now he understood that important chapters had been left out. Isabel looked around the room and realized something unexpected. The secret she had spent days chasing had never been about power. It had been about belonging, about a place within a family, about a truth that should have been acknowledged long ago. Eleanor finally lifted her head. The fear that had followed her for years seemed lighter now. James stood quietly near the doorway, watching the family confront a history that could no longer be ignored. As the meeting came to an end, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Harrison Estate. The future remained uncertain, but the silence was gone. Harrison picked up the photograph one last time before placing it beside the completed files. After 22 years, the story was finally where it belonged, in the open. And for the first time in a very long time, the family could begin moving forward with the truth instead of hiding from it.